So I'd like to call the this edition of the Airport Commission meeting to order and ask for a roll call. Mel.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Commissioner Goodman.
Here.
Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Glazier.
Here.
Commissioner Bowen.
Here.
Commissioner Maya.
Here.
Vice Chair Houghton.
Here.
Chair Arcuri.
And here.
And we have a quorum.
Already. And also, just say to everybody, I'm so used to doing this on Zoom now. A, I had to get dressed up. B, I couldn't have any wine. And C, I'm a little rusty. So if it seems like I don't know what I'm doing, it's because I'm still getting back up to speed. But do we have any changes to the agenda? No changes to the agenda. All right. And I know, Tava, you'll keep me minding my P's and Q's. So notices that on Thursday, June 9th, 2022 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary, the wonderful Mo, duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the airport administration. And as I mentioned earlier, public comment, any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled before us that same day. Total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes, and no individual speaker may speak for more than 3 minutes. And that's if you have something that's within the airport kind of purview, but not on the agenda. On each item on the agenda, there's also an opportunity to speak, following kind of the same plan. Oh, can I move them? Okay, got it. Test. Okay. All right, so liaison reports. I see we have both city councilmen here, and Santa Barbara Councilman Eric Friedman, could you give us a report if you have one? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair Arcuri. Eric Friedman, Santa Barbara City Council liaison. I don't have much to report other than the city council is basically did our preliminary budget adoption and went with the recommendation that came out of the Airport Commission from a month ago, and we will do our final adoption on June 28th. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman, and Goleta Councilmember Kyle Richards.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Kyle Richards, City of Goleta City Council. I don't have anything airport related from the city today. I will just let you know that tomorrow evening we're celebrating the Fiesta Ranchera at the Stowe House. So I hope you'll join us. This is the Goleta version of, it's the Goleta activity of the Old Spanish Days Fiesta. So we like to get our Fiesta started a little early. Hope to see you there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Richards. Next, a report from the interim. I hope we get to erase that preface soon, but interim Airport Director DeMoore, would you like to give us your report?
I would, but before we do that, I want to remind you that we did skip over public comment. I think we did anyway.
Oh, your good Lord, we did. I'm so sorry. Thank you. See, you are supposed to be on top of this. Oh, you told him to yell at me. I don't believe we have any members of the public who wish to comment on anything that is not on the agenda. We do not. We do not. So I don't have any speaker slips for that. Thank you. Now, could we have your report?
Yes. So, like with the council members, I don't have as much to report this time as I have in previous months. But I did want to mention we had our highest level of activity so far this year in the terminal over the weekend. So we're definitely ramping up into a very busy summer season, and things have gotten a little bit better in the queuing area downstairs. It hasn't had to go downstairs quite as often as we had feared, but it's very busy in the mornings. And then again at the noon hour, we've got a couple of peaks, but it's been managed pretty well, so that's been a little bit of a relief, and thanks to the ops team for helping out as much as they can. There's a lot that's not in our control, but between TSA and the airlines, everyone's doing their part, and it's, like I said, it's going to be a very busy summer season. And then just some other things. We have a number of items that are headed to City Council in the next few weeks, and I just wanted to give a heads up to the commission and members of the public. Just kind of going through chronologically here, looking ahead at next week. We have 2 items. One is on consent. It's just an authorization to execute an FAA grant. So that's not something that this commission has directly seen, but it's just simply a consent item. And for efficiency's sake, we went straight to council on that. And then we also have the terminal expansion and parking structure contract, which is something that we did present to this commission last month. So that's going to go to council next week as an admin item. And then the last council meeting of the month, June 28th, we have 3 items, a couple of minor consent items, just some amendments to existing contracts. And then that is the day that we plan to present the General Western Aero hangar feasibility study to the council, which was also presented, I believe it was last month, to the Airport Commission. And then in July, not exactly sure on the date. I'm not going to throw a date out there yet because it could move, but the Airport Master Plan update, the contract for that is going to be going to council, but you will hear more about that item in just a few moments. So that's all that I have. Nothing really new to report on the airport director recruitment for anybody who's curious. It's been a couple of weeks since I've heard anything. So at one point I thought it might wrap up this month. I don't know that at this point. So that's all I have on that. That's it for the airport director's report.
Do any commission members have any questions?
Yeah, just a
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. A comment as far as the recruitment effort. To my knowledge, we haven't seen anything coming to the commission at this stage. Last time around, the Airport Commission was involved in the interview cycle on that. Has there been anything from the city yet to on that topic?
Yes, Commissioner Bowen. What I plan to do, it's a little bit awkward for me because I'm one of the candidates. But when I meet with the Assistant City Administrator, I think it's later this week or early next week, Renee Irely, I'm going to remind her of that municipal code requirement and that the commission needs to be involved and advise on that process and kind of let her take it from there. But it would be helpful if I could understand kind of what the commission did the last time around, because I would imagine there's some expectation that the involvement would be perhaps similar to the last time. And it might be helpful with new folks in the administrator's office if I could convey that. But I don't know that we need to get into that discussion here, since that's not an agendized item.
All right, thank you for your answers.
Sure.
Any other commission members? I have a question. At the last meeting, you discussed an RNAV approach that the FAA published that some of the airlines were flying. Are they all flying that now? What is that RNAV approach called? Do you know what it's called? Which I guess I don't really need the answer to that. If there's an answer, great. But are all the airlines now flying that? Is it published, and are all the airplanes from an op spec perspective flying it?
Chair Curry, I'm going to put one of the new faces here on the spot, and I don't know for sure that he'll have
Get the spotlight.
the answers here, but I do have at the table here with us today John Feldhans, who's one of our operations supervisors. He's not the one who specializes in the airport noise issue, but I believe he may be able to give a brief overview of what's going on with
just
the RNAV.
45 minutes will be fine.
Yeah, it'll be very brief.
And a presentation.
I know most of the airlines have their proprietary RNAV approaches. Not all of them do, but I know most of them do. They have the RNAV approach flies them over the open space over, I believe it's Mora Mesa. I'm still new, so I'm trying to figure it all out. So that's all I know. If you want a more detailed answer, we can get it. from the guy that actually kind of put it through. But if you want more detail, we can obviously get it for you. But that's
guess-
kind of a general overview.
Thanks, John. Just a general question. Has there been a corresponding decrease, no change, or increase in noise complaints?
So what we've seen with that RNAV approach having been approved by the FAA, we've seen a consolidation of all the flight paths to one very solid dark line. It used to be, looked like a bunch of spaghetti was thrown on the map. And now, like I said, it's one very solid dark line. I think we have seen some reduction in complaints, but because now you've got a concentrated flight path, we're seeing more complaints coming from a more concentrated area. But overall, it has resulted in I think there's a slight reduction, but we can get more data, and maybe perhaps it could be time to look at trying to agendize noise, which we haven't talked about in quite a while.
Okay. Thank you, Director DeMore and John. John, are you new with us here? New to the airport?
I am. I've only been here 7 months, so I came from the County of Ventura, where I was there for 11 years, anywhere from maintenance to operations to the ops supervisor down there. So I'm still learning the area, still learning the airport, but I have a good foundation. So
Awesome. Welcome aboard.
thanks.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the, do I have any, thank you, Tava. I'm just going to go ahead and leave and let Dennis take over.
You're doing great.
Let me look here. I don't believe we have any speaker slips on this topic. I am sure Vince, yeah, so I don't have any speaker slips. I don't remember. Do we need a speaker slip, or can we just? Open, yeah. Got it. So do we have any members of the public who would like their 3 minutes to talk about anything that was just covered in the director's report? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, now we'll move on to this consent calendar. So the consent calendar is typically very run-of-the-mill items. They're not things that are expected to generate any controversy. They're run-of-the-mill leases that are within kind of the brackets that the airport operates in. And so I'll read both items on the consent calendar. I'll ask for any comments or questions from the commission and the public on either of the items. And if nobody has any, then I'll ask for a motion to just approve the consent calendar as read, rather than doing it individually, just for expediency. So tonight there's 2 items on the consent calendar. The first item is recommendation that the Airport Commission waive the reading. One day we ought to just make you read it anyway, just to see how that works. The Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the commission meeting that was held on Wednesday, May 18th, 2022. And the second and last item is the property management report in May of 2022, and the recommendation that the Airport Commission receive the monthly airport property management report. So do I have any commission members that are dying to ask questions on either of those 2 things? I thought not. Are there any members of the public that are equally excited about making any? Terry, you're always a troublemaker. Okay, well then I'd love to entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as I read it.
I move to approve the consent calendar as read.
Spectacular. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dennis, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. Any opposed? No, it looks like that carries unanimously. And I got through that without any help from Tava. I think we're ready to take the training wheels off now. Okay, item number 8, administrative reports. We would love to receive a presentation regarding the pending contract. Has anybody ever seen The Never-Ending Story? If you have kids, you've seen The Never-Ending Story. The never-ending, and I don't say that sarcastically, master plan update. So we'd love to receive that report from Sarah. Awesome.
Go ahead, Ms. Isa.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
I'm Sarah Isa. I'm the Land Development Manager. I spoke last week about the terminal improvement project, and tonight I will be talking about the master plan update contract that will be going to council next month, July 19th. A little bit of background. So many of you know in 2017, the master plan was last updated, and it was based on 2011 and 2012 data. That's a typo there. Master plan updates are for commercial service airports recommended by FAA to be updated every 5 to 10 years. So we're at that point, considering our last data is 10 years old, and a lot has happened in that time. The master plan update looks at a 20-year planning horizon, and it considers changing conditions in the industry and specifically the region and what's going on here at Santa Barbara Airport. And it provides us a clear path forward for development and improvements moving forward. Next slide, please. We will be looking, using the guiding principles from the 2017 master plan for this master plan update. And those were incorporating safety and security first and foremost, looking at economic vitality, transportation diversity. There will be some changes in transportation, I understand, just speaking to consultants. Community, of course, sustainability, environmental preservation. We do share our property with the Goleta Slough. And, of course, cultural resource protection. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of the 2017 master plan recommended concept. And you can see there are a lot of projects on there. This is very small, but a lot of projects were recommended. We've completed a few, and some have not come to fruition yet. So we want to take a look at those projects and also looking further beyond into the 20-year horizon. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a rundown of how the process works once we develop the master plan. So the projects identified in the master plan get into our ASIP. It's our capital improvement program. And we work with FAA on funding those projects. And so I know this is hard to read, but it gives you an idea of projects that are in our current ASIP that are funded. And so we look at anything from, the master plan update, which was funded this year, to a noise compatibility, and I'll speak more about that in a second. Taxiway H extension, various taxiway improvements, et cetera. And of course, the terminal expansion. Next slide, please. So once a project is on the ASIP, we get the funding, and then we start construction. And so this is construction from the 2017 master plan. It's the realignment of Taxiway Bravo. So this is this is actually a 2008 photo, but just for illustration purposes. We start construction, and then next slide, please. And then we have a newly aligned Taxiway Bravo. So, and John, please jump in if you see any inconsistencies. But this was actually taken last night during construction of the PFAS remediation project, but I digress. Next slide, please. So that said, we have some pending projects from the 2017 master plan that we've talked a little bit about over the past few months. One is the terminal expansion and parking project. That's going to council next week. We have the ongoing FBO redevelopment project. We have a pending contract amendment with Jacobs going to council soon, June 28th. And then, of course, Taxiway Hotel, and that's a big one. And we're working with FAA on the environmental portion of that right now. Next slide, please. So this is a figure showing potential improvements, again, from the 2017 master plan. The green is the where a possible parking structure could go. And then the blue blocks are north and south of the existing terminal for room for expansion. I wanted to give you an idea of projects that we're still thinking of from 2017, but then we're going to talk about moving beyond that. Next slide, please. So we issued a request for qualifications in February 2022. I arrived here in December, so it took a couple of months to pull it together. We issued the RFQ then, and then we held interviews with 2 firms in April 2022 with a panel here from the airport. And then we selected a consultant who I will speak more about in just a moment, and negotiated the scope and fee with them between May and June, and we're still working that out, but we have an independent fee estimate, which is required from FAA to make sure that the pricing is in alignment with with current standards, and we've also been coordinating closely with FAA on the receipt of the funding. Next slide, please. So as I said, the qualifications are based on a selection process, and the selection panel evaluated and interviewed 2 firms, and Mead & Hunt was the highest rated firm. It was a close call, but they did edge out the other firm. Next slide, please. So Mead & Hunt, they brought together a really good group of sub-consultants. Rincon Environmental, they're a local environmental firm that will be doing all of the environmental. We thought that they would be a good fit given our proximity to the Goleta Slough and the environmental sensitivity here. And then we have NV5, they specialize in GIS and aerial mapping. We have a need to update all of that with LiDAR. They're going to do a great job. And then Walker Consultants and Unison Consulting, they're going to help with the financial portion and the implementation plan. So what they were talking about in terms of forecasting and financial analysis really sounded great to us. So I think that's going to be a wonderful portion of the plan. Next slide, please. And so these are the project managers from Mead & Hunt, and then also from the subs. I just wanted to give you an idea, and there's their contact information. Next slide, please. So I summarize this a lot because there are a lot of deliverables in this contract, but I wanted to talk about ones that are really important to Airport Commission specifically. So there will be a big project kickoff meeting or series of meetings that will include Airport Commission to talk about the scope, goals, and objectives of the master plan update. We'll be looking at issues and topic areas, and then developing a project timeline and roles of the team, specifically how Airport Commission wants to be involved. They're also going to be doing a lot of research and analysis of existing conditions here. They will be creating conceptual designs that we can work through different alternatives. There's a huge public outreach and engagement portion of the scope. It's required by FAA. We've also bolstered it quite a bit. We're obviously surrounded by the city of Goleta, UCSB, and the county, and we want to make sure that we're doing more than enough outreach. And there will be a Spanish translation component to that, in addition to a website. And then, of course, the implementation plan, which will include the financial analysis, which I spoke a little bit about. We will be doing a very robust noise section rather than updating the Part 150. We've taken the money that we were allocated for that to just create an entire new noise section, which will include several updated noise contours based on existing operations. And then, of course, decision-making hearings. So we will have, obviously, a lot of meetings with the Airport Commission and then City Council as well. And, yeah, I think it's Airport City Council and Planning Commission. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, we have a lot of projects concurrently going on, including the FBO redevelopment and the terminal. We wanted to make sure that Mead & Hunt is coordinating with Jacobs, who will be doing the FBO redevelopment programming, and then Corgan, who has been selected for the terminal expansion and parking. We also are kicking off a sea level rise vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. We have not selected the consultant for that yet, but Mead & Hunt will be coordinating with them. We're working on that work plan right now. And they will also, we wanted to be sure that they're considering stormwater and drainage improvements, since it's a huge factor here at the airport and it's only forecasted to get worse. So any improvements that they're looking at in the master plan will be looking at future flooding levels. Next slide, please. So we plan to go to Council on July 19th with the contract that may be pushed due to FAA funding availability. The total contract is $919,000. That includes a 10% contingency. And it also includes FAA grant assurance, which they reimburse the airport almost 91% of our costs. And right now we have a little over $4 million available to not necessarily play with, but to use on projects like this. And it's been included in our ASIP. And then the approximate performance period will be about 18 months from start to finish, give or take, depending on, of course, the level of collaboration and how the other projects are moving forward at the same time. The next slide, please. And then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do I have any commission members with questions? Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I know that there's some discussion about a potential closure of one of the parallel runways. Is that part of what is happening with the update here?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. That was an alternative that was included in the 2017 master plan, and it will be analyzed again.
Okay.
Yes, and of course, as I mentioned, there will be plenty of trips to Airport Commission to receive feedback.
All right.
So,
There's nothing going
yeah.
to council now that would affect that.
No, this
Okay.
is all conceptual.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we'll get it all wrapped up and have it done in a couple of months, right? No, that's,
18. Yeah.
it got it. No, I meant the whole development. Any other commissioners with questions? Do I have any members of the public that would love to make comments on the master plan presentation? Let me just take a quick look through here to make sure we don't have anybody. I'm quite sure it's all on item 9, but just to be positive. Nope. Okay, well, with that. Oh, yes.
May I speak?
Of course.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the report. Thank you, Sarah. I was really happy to see that one of the deliverables you mentioned was the public outreach and engagement, which you described as huge. So that was great. I'm really happy about that on behalf of the community that surrounds the airport, and including the city of Goleta. I also noticed that under guiding principles, I think it was the 3rd slide, one of the principles was community, but it wasn't really elaborated what that meant when it says community as a guiding principle. So, I'm thinking, does that mean, is that the outreach and public engagement that you're talking about? And I'm wondering also, does that include the goal of minimizing the impacts to the community? Is that one of the stated goals as well, or guiding principles? And then just another question I have is with regard to the data that you're using for the update. It mentions that the 2017 update used 2011 and 12 data, and what is the current set of data that is being used for this? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. So I'll answer your last question first. The current data will be existing. They will be looking at existing operations to look at the forecasts. At the same time, Corgan, who's doing the terminal planning, will be doing their own forecasts. So we've worked with both of them to make one united forecast together that they both agree on. And then your second question was about the guiding principle of community. Those guiding principles were the result of several meetings. I wasn't here at that time, but I do know how it worked during the previous master plan. There's a desire to work with the community on the outcome of the master plan. And so that includes public outreach and receiving feedback and using that feedback to improve the plan that's viable for the community. I hope that answers your question.
Alrighty. No more commission member questions. Thank you, Councilman Richards. Thank you very much, Sarah, for the presentation. And we'll move on to the last item. Update on the revised minimum standard requirements for aeronautical activities at Santa Barbara Airport, and the recommendation that the Airport Commission receive a presentation from staff regarding the status of the revisions to the minimum standard requirements for aeronautical activities at Santa Barbara Airport, provide policy direction to staff regarding key components of the minimum standards requirements, and to consider whether to refer discussion on fees to the General Aviation Subcommittee. Director DeMoore, who's going to make this presentation?
That would be me.
That would be you.
Yeah.
Take it away.
All right. Well, since it's 6:30, I'm thinking we're going to be out of here pretty early, right? With only one item left on the agenda. Although
Don't count on it.
We do have a bigger audience than usual, so maybe they came for this item. Next slide, please. So our presentation outline, this is pretty much standard format here of staff presentation, comments, questions, discussion, and commission action. So we can move on to the next slide, please. Before we begin this agenda item, I want to acknowledge that a lot of people have taken a lot of time to meet with me and help bring me up to speed on this issue. When I first walked into this position, I didn't know what minimum standards were. I'll freely admit that. And so those conversations have been very helpful in bringing me up to speed to understand, the individual issues that make up the minimum standards. It didn't take me long to realize that this is a topic that is a little bit of a lightning rod. However, I'm not somebody that's going to shy away from a challenge, and I've been working diligently on this issue since January, and due to some transitions with staff, with former operations manager Aaron Keller leaving, kind of ended up being the last one left standing to help move this thing along. And we do have John, who's coming up to speed and will be helpful as we move forward. But for the last couple of months, it's been me pushing this forward, and I'm hopeful with where we're at, and what I really hope that you'll see that this is a draft that's not simply legally defensible, but it's logical, fair, and reasonable, and it displays evidence that the administration is out there and it's listening and it's trying to balance the needs of various stakeholders. What am I looking for today? Chair Arcuri did read the staff recommendations, but I do want to reiterate that really hoping for some policy direction from the commission. So I'm not looking for a vote of approval on this redraft as it is currently written. I recognize that there are probably some, hopefully, more minor things that need to be tweaked. It's not a perfect document. I will recognize that. And it's only been out there for 6 days. So I wanted to acknowledge that as well. So I understand there's going to be a little bit more process before we can get this wrapped up. So I think with that, we can go to the next slide, please. Some basics here, which you all probably know more than I do, but I'll still kind of go through and talk about what our minimum standards and why. There may be members of the public who tune in to the recording and want to learn about minimum standards. So they're not required by the FAA, but they are recommended to provide language related to the purpose and objectives. The FAA provides some guidance language regarding minimum standards. And the FAA also recognizes that every airport is different and therefore allows each airport to develop their own minimum standards. Really some of the key things that they say, and I'll look down here as I reread this, but the airport and its facilities must be available for public use as an airport, and that the terms imposed on those who use the airport and its services must be reasonable and applied without unjust economic discrimination. And that's the language we all love to hear, the unjust economic discrimination. What the heck does that mean? They don't really provide a lot of clarity on what that means, so it's left to airport administrators to sort that out for their particular airport and based on the users that they have. And a lot of that language matches what's written in the grant assurances, and as an airport sponsor, we're required to follow if we want to continue to receive grants to do things like the airport master plan. Next slide, please. Minimum standards here for SBA. Just a simple timeline here is shown on the screen. And just wanted to highlight that the existing MSR that we have in place was developed and approved back in November 2017. So it's going on 5 years old. But there's been a lot of work to revisit that over the past almost 4 years, beginning in November 2018 when we had our first letter from the FAA. There have been a series of letters that have followed, and we've been in close coordination with the FAA on the minimum standards. And last year, there was a task force working group, which was very involved with the prior airport administration in providing comments and providing input on the development of revised minimum standards, which were released back in November 2021, and those were made available for public comment through January 2022. And that's when I came on board, was January 2022. So basically I saw the prior draft and I saw all of the public comments, and then I started meeting with a whole bunch of different people, and since then have been thinking about how to redraft this to try to be responsive to the various needs of different stakeholders. And January 9th of 2022, which was last Thursday, you all saw the redraft of the minimum standards. Next slide, please. So some of the changes in this redraft of the minimum standards, for the most part, the changes exist in Article 8 under independent operators. There are some changes also in Section 10.1 flying clubs and a small change in airport security. But under the Article 8, the big change I wanted to highlight was that the previous draft, the November draft, pretty much did not allow independent operators except by special permission of the airport director if it could be proven that those services were not available on the airport from an existing operator with a fixed place of business. That language has been changed in this redraft to allow for independent operators to perform services on this airport. However, they will need to follow a permitting process, provide insurance, business license, and pay a permitting fee, which has not yet been determined. And let's see. There are limitations on the scope of services that those independent operators can provide, and I'll get into that briefly in the next series of slides. Go ahead, Mo. So starting with independent flight training. And some of this language was in the previous draft, so that's why it just says elements of current draft MSR. It doesn't say proposed changes on this slide. But the independent flight instructor cannot use their own aircraft. That was in the previous draft, but it's worth highlighting here again. No ground school or advertising on airport property, and that the independent flight training instructor must maintain and provide a flight training log. That's in addition to the permitting process with business license, insurance, and fees, which all independent operators would be required to provide. Next slide, please. I've lumped a bunch of these other independent operators together here, but we've got the detailer and washer. Really the only thing in there, I think we were a little bit more clear on location needing to be specified in this redraft. And then on maintenance, I kind of grouped that all together. Again, location to be provided, must maintain and provide a maintenance log, and that an exception is needed if they're to provide anything beyond preventative maintenance. Next slide. Quick change on airport security. We did specify that all commercial operators, so that would be both fixed and independent, must display a security identification badge issued by the airport. That's in section 3.8. And then flying clubs, there really weren't a lot of changes in the language here, but some things worth reiterating, that the language provided for the most part mirrors language provided by the FAA in their order 5190.6B. I think it's called Change 1. And then flight instruction is allowed in club aircraft, and the instructor and the person receiving the instruction must be club members. And we also require that the instructor obtain a permit from the city. And that's really it on some of the key highlights. I know there's a lot of public who is eager to speak here, and there may be a lot of questions from the commission on this. And so I'm going back to the staff recommendations here and reminding everyone that we're looking for the Airport Commission to provide policy direction to staff on some of these key components. And depending on the level of support for these revisions, and whatever issues there might be outstanding, the commission may wish to consider referring the minimum standards, not just the fees, but any remaining issues. As I said, the committee may wish to refer, kind of package all of that up and refer that to the General Aviation Subcommittee, or it can stay here at the full committee. I don't know that everybody is as passionate about minimum standards, so it could be a good place, a good forum to hash out some of those hopefully more minor details. But I also understand that it's, like I said at the very beginning, it's a topic that's a bit of a lightning rod, and it affects people's livelihood. So I understand the emotion involved in the issue, with the issue, and yeah, with that, that's really the end. That there weren't a lot of changes in terms of number of words, but it's a significant change in direction, and I'm hoping to get some feedback from the commission on all of that. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Director DeMoore. Do I have any commission members, starting with Paul, that have any questions?
Fast hand on the mic button.
What was the game show where you had to hit the, go ahead.
Yeah. First off, Brian, thank you very much for all the hard work you've been putting in on this. And I truly believe that we're getting much, much closer to a document that's fair and hopefully we can get this resolved and move on to other things, and everybody gets back to just running their businesses and succeeding. I truly believe that this should go before the GA subcommittee meeting. I'm not sure how my other committee people feel on that, and I guess we'll find that out tonight. The volume of issues, just my personal copy of things that I alone have spotted, and then I've got, a letter from AOPA with more issues, and then another one from Carl Hopkins with more issues and stuff. I just believe that a lot of this should be worked in the GA subcommittee venue. So as the chairperson of the GA subcommittee, I'd like to formally request that you schedule us a meeting for that. And I will reserve most of my comments on the actual document for that meeting, and prefer to provide more time to my fellow airport commissioners who aren't on the GA subcommittee meeting to get their concerns and questions in. Thank you.
Marty, go ahead, Liba.
Just a procedural question. Would it be appropriate now to share our comments, or should we save that for the discussion section? I'm not sure, how we want to
I think
handle
it's
that.
completely appropriate to ask questions and ask for clarification. I suspect that there will be significant support for convening the GA subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
And to dive into this, into the details. And it's not as though we can't deal with the details now, but kind of the idea behind the subcommittees was that's a forum to drill down very deeply into all the issues, and then the subcommittee comes back to the commission and says, well, this is what, kind of what we recommend.
Yeah.
Those recommendations are not necessarily binding, but it's, for members of the commission who may not, I don't want to say care, but may not be as energized around this topic and understand the topic as well. It kind of gives them comfort that people who did dive into it did a lot of due diligence. So I don't know if that was an answer. Feel free to ask questions, but the opportunity, I believe
I'm not on the
it's-
GA subcommittee.
It's
so that-
Cassandra,
yeah.
Paul, and me, right? Yeah. So I'm pretty sure this is going to wind up there. In fact, I'm sure it's going to wind up there.
Okay.
And that's a good place to ask lots of details, as kind of Paul illuminated, but I wouldn't hesitate to maybe pick some items that you think are bigger.
Yeah, being a new member to the commission and trying to get familiar with the rules about when I may and may not participate, I don't think I'd be able to participate in the discussion at the GA subcommittee as a member of this commission.
That is correct.
So I would like to ask for some time now to present some issues.
Ask away.
Okay, great. So, Director Diamore, I appreciate this tremendous effort to revise these minimum standards. It's a huge step, I think, in the right direction. I'm encouraged by the tremendous work that's gone into revising this document. As you said, it hasn't changed substantially in size, but it's changed substantially in substance. I think the prior revision of the minimum standards was, in short, a gross overcorrection to some issues, and I think this revision demonstrates a thoughtful approach to addressing the core issues that are at hand. I have a few remaining concerns with a few of the items after a review, and I'll try to keep these brief, but I've tried to break them out here by section. But in section 8.1, subsection C1, independent flight instruction, looking at an advertising restriction on independent flight training operators and not any other type of commercial operator seems unwarranted to me and could potentially be a violation of First Amendment protections on free speech, particularly considering that Santa Barbara Airport's on public property. I mean, I'll leave it to attorneys to decide whether or not that's the case. But while it's within the city's authority to prohibit signage or soliciting on the airport, it probably isn't what we want to do, at least what I would like to see us do, to prohibit otherwise legal signage on a private motor vehicle or private discourse, or even the transferring of contact information by means of a business card between private individuals. I think there's probably a bit of an overreach in I understand what you're trying to do there and not have people basically open a flight school out of a vehicle, but it also seems to me that we're treading a very thin line there between what we can and can't do. I'd like to see us create regulations in that regard that are enforceable, and I just can't vote to approve a version of this document unless we resolve that issue there of whether or not, private discourse, free speech, that sort of thing. Moving to section on flying clubs, section 10.1 B, leased versus owned aircraft. I think this is just a general oversight and probably something the subcommittee would have found out, but you've expressed a desire to permit leased aircraft being used by flying clubs, but it wasn't changed in section B, 10.1B general. That was also just limiting it to owned aircraft and aircraft that vested in the name of the flying club. So I think that's just an oversight that needs to be corrected. Section 10.1C on fees. We received some comments today by email from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. They maintain data on this sort of thing. They said that Santa Barbara Airport is likely the only airport in the United States to consider charging an annual fee for flying clubs of $100 per flying club member and up to $2,000 annually. FAA guidance is pretty clear that flying clubs qualify as an individual under grant assurances, and so they have the right to fuel and maintain aircraft as their members have the right to fuel and maintain aircraft at the field. I think this fee creates a financial burden by singling out only one type of aircraft owner, flying clubs. Flying clubs, of course, are designed to make aircraft ownership available to people who otherwise might not be able to afford access to an aircraft. And the issue here, and I'll move on to this further, but I think because this fee isn't imposed on any other type of non-commercial aircraft owner, it might be seen as discriminatory in nature. Couple more items. 10.1D10 about the record keeping by flying clubs. I guess my question, because I don't have any information about this and couldn't find any, is airport staff or the city attorney aware of any other airports that require flying clubs to log and keep records of all flight training provided in flying club-owned aircraft?
I can look into that. I don't know the answer right now.
Yeah, okay. I think if we're requiring independent flight instructors to maintain that data, that it's probably redundant to have the flying clubs also maintain that data. So the burden of compliance and reporting of regulated training activity should fall entirely on the independent flight training operator, which is the for-profit entity, the certified flight instructor. They're financially benefiting from the flight training and not the flying club. They're just the aircraft owner. So to require both to maintain those records seems like we may be overstepping and also just putting a burden on a nonprofit group without paid employees for record keeping that are otherwise being kept in another location. 10.1a, the definition of a flying club, states that it's a nonprofit entity, a corporation, association, or partnership organized for the express purpose of providing its members with aircraft for their personal use or enjoyment. I know that comes from the FAA. My concern, and maybe you can assuage this concern, but is that it's a very broad definition, and it could potentially include other types of private partnerships or private aircraft owners who do not wish to be seen as flying clubs and be subject to onerous regulatory and reporting requirements by the city. So I'm not convinced that those requirements are even needed for the flying club, but if they are ultimately needed and this commission decides that they are, then we have an issue where other organizations that are not flying clubs in name may be sucked into that umbrella and those regulatory requirements imposed on them. So I just want to be mindful of that and go on the record with that now as something we should keep our eye on. Just in summary about flying clubs, I think many of the items in Article 10 appear to stem from the desire to address allegations by a fixed flight training operator of unfair training practices. That issue should be dealt with directly with policies that address the providers of flight training, namely certified flight instructors, independent flight training operators on the field. Flying clubs aren't independent operators. They're not permitted to advertise training or rental services to the public under these rules, and they're private, non-commercial organizations. The FAA recognizes their standing as individuals with the purpose of making aircraft available for various non-commercial purposes. I'm concerned that an overcorrection here and imposing these unusual fees and compliance burdens on flying clubs could lead to a continued conflict, dispute, and litigation for the airport and the city. So the simple enforcement of reasonable fees and reporting requirements for independent flight training operators could wholly address the issues at hand, and of course, enforcement of those restrictions on flying clubs and the operations that they may participate in would also stem that without having additional fees or reporting requirements for individual private owners. The final item I think I want to address is that there's a recurring theme from public comment, and that's been the uncertainty about the fees. Some folks have commented about fees, sent in public comment about fees. I agree they shouldn't be codified in this minimum standards because then we have to update the minimum standards to change the fees, and we don't want to do this every time we have inflation raising our costs and whatnot. So I understand that the fees probably should be a separate schedule, and I agree with that. But I'm not in agreement with imposing fees. I'm not in agreement with imposing fees on the flying clubs. I do think that reasonable fees on independent flight instruction will address the concerns that we have before us. I want to make certain that the intention by the airport staff is that the commission will receive a schedule of those fees and approve them at a later date once the minimum standards are approved. Is that your intention, Mr. Director?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. All of our
Perfect.
fees come before the airport commission.
Okay, thank you. And the final item I wanted to mention was I think it would be helpful if we could get a track change version of the minimum standards as they've evolved over time so that we can see the changes in red as they've happened just because this has been a living document for so long, it's hard to get our arms around it.
I agree with that. I think it's nice to have a clean version, but it's also nice to be able to look back and what we could produce for the next public venue that we have to deliberate on this could be a track changes of the current compared to the 2017 version. We can also compare the current draft to the November draft, so you can kind of flip back and forth and see what has changed.
Yeah. Most interesting to me is the two versions that have happened within the past year. I think prior to that may be of interest to others, but not necessarily to me. Those are the ones that I think we have the most contentious issues with. So despite my lengthy discussion here, I wanted to return to congratulating you on the effort that you've put into this. I think you've heard from a lot of different stakeholders with various interests, and this draft represents obviously a lot of work. So appreciate the effort that you've put into it and the effort that the other commissioners have put into reviewing this. I know it's a contentious issue, and I'm hoping we can come to an amicable agreement about what the standards are moving forward.
Any other commission members with questions or observations? So you're a tough act to follow, Levi. I had a couple on the just on the slides on the description. I guess it's slide 8 of independent aircraft or GSE maintenance, which is ground service equipment. Is that correct? And avionics and instrument maintenance. Location must be specified in permit. Yeah, I guess I understand that. Provide a maintenance log. Is that something new, or is that been in there? Is that something you would expect the maintenance provider to maintain and then provide?
Yes, it's expected that would be maintained and provided. I don't believe that is new language, just something that was highlighted here in these slides.
Got it. And exception needed for more than preventative maintenance. So I think what that addresses is somebody lands and sucks a bird into a jet engine, and Pratt & Whitney's going to send a truck up to swap the engine out. That's not preventative maintenance, and that's not something that's probably going to be done on the field, or maybe it could be done on the field, but that's specifically around somebody coming in from the outside to do something that is kind of out of the ordinary. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess what I would say to clarify on that is aircraft owners are allowed to do, I don't have it cited here in front of me, but there's code that allows them to do preventive maintenance on their own aircraft. And what I'm saying here is that independent operators can do that same preventive maintenance without any special exception. They just need to be permitted to do so. And if they want to do beyond preventive maintenance, then they're going to need to come in and get more of a special exception to that permitting process, because oftentimes that kind of work just involves a lot more equipment or risk, and we need to make sure that it's being done in a manner that is safe.
Got it. And final question, in general, on the insurance front, whether it's flight instruction, aircraft detailers, I don't even know if the detailer that was detailing aircraft here actually even still comes. I haven't seen his truck, but whether it's them or independent, a maintenance operator that might come onto the field to do something that isn't available here or whatever, are there like uniform insurance requirements that require the city to be named as additional insured and that sort of stuff, and limits, and that's already there now, is it not, or isn't it?
Chair Curry, that's correct. I had a conversation earlier today with our risk manager, and he provided me the levels of insurance that are required for the different types of activities. And it doesn't matter if you're somebody who does that activity 5 times a year or has 20 employees doing that type of activity every single day. The city wants to have the same level of coverage for the type of service that's being provided. Now, when you go out onto the market to purchase that type of insurance, you'll likely pay more if you're doing that activity more frequently.
Right.
But we just want to make sure we have the same level of protection for the same type of service that's being provided. There are certain things with these independent operators that I think we're going to have to work with our risk manager on to see what the appropriate levels are. And he committed to attending future meetings, being available. So if we go to GA subcommittee to hash out some of these details, he would be more than willing to attend and help answer questions with that.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. So we have a number of speakers. Mo, are you going to be the timekeeper? Awesome. Do I have any other speaker slips on this subject that if you have one and you're holding it in your hand, and hi, Carl, and you're saving it, now would be a good time to give it to me. So let's start with former Commissioner Jim Wilson. And again, just a reminder to everybody, please try to keep it close to 3 minutes so that everybody can have the opportunity to talk. Well, we're going to pay attention to that, but we'll be a little lax there.
Well,
Take it away, Jim.
Chairman Arcuri, Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. It does feel a little odd to be on this side of the dais rather than that side, but my years on that side gave me an appreciation for the complexity of the issues that the airport faces, and also an appreciation for the years and the hundreds, if not thousands of hours that have gone into the development of this minimum standard. My reading of the draft is that it neatly addresses the major problems that the airport faces and is a very solid basis for moving forward. Thank you all. You're to be commended.
Thanks, Jim, former Commissioner Wilson. Jim Gaskin. Come on up. We good?
Oh, you can hear me all right?
We can.
Yeah, I sort of reviewed the documents in the past few days,
Mo?
and I had some comments that I think were pretty well addressed. Basically, all I can say is I think Brian's done a great job. This was a horrible mess a while ago. My comments were largely addressed by Mr. Maya, is that correct? I think I'm glad to see what's happening here, and I think I have no point to make any further comment.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Mo, I can do the timekeeping if. Oh, you. We're having technical difficulties. Okay. Terry Harris, come on up. So you've got the time. Okay.
And just stop me. I've done this so many times. I'm Terry Harris. I'm a career flight instructor and independent on this field. So I was trying to compose what I should say, but I just want to talk to you guys and cut me off when I'm nearing 3 minutes. But this issue has pretty much broken my heart. I'm 35 years an independent flight instructor on the field, and I'm looking at you, Sean. I just feel like one day I must have taken a nap, and I woke up and there was this big drama and divide in our community. And I'm so grateful, Mr. DeMoore, on commission, that we're looking at it fresh, and I just feel like it's not such a big problem, and we can fix it, and let's do it right this time. And I have clients in their 80s and 70s who've been my students for 30 years, and they have a they get a new circuit breaker and they say, "Come on, Terry, come up. I want to, like, I hear a sound that's different," and they want me, and I know their airplane, and I think we're working towards an agreement where we can all get along, and there's so much work for everyone. We don't even have enough flight instructors. Most of my work is checkouts on the flying club planes. I don't teach ratings anymore. I do proficiency for owners. I do flight reviews. And a lot of what I do is checking out students in flying club airplanes, and they were trained at above all, and they're good. They're well trained. I don't have any problem with any of that. I appreciate, and I always see how well trained they are, and I just want us to get along. And obviously we can't pass a draft that doesn't have numbers on it, and Carl will say this very articulately. I've read what he's going to say, and we can obviously we can't vote yes on paying a tax if we haven't read how much we're going to pay. So all that is where I have faith in you guys, and I offer myself to any of you who want to discuss any way I can be helpful. And I feel I was about to just hang up my license and go put up a shingle at another airport, and I feel hopeful for the first time in a long time, and I really appreciate you guys. So, yay.
Thanks, Terry. Vince.
My name is Vince Merstick. I'm just a pilot that's flown out of Santa Barbara for like 55 years. I'd like to start off by first expressing my thanks to you commissioners for accepting this unpaid position. I think you deserve some praise for that. Secondly, I would also like to give special thanks to Director DeMoore for his work in providing a breath of fresh air to the development of this MSR. Although he's not been on he's only been on the job for a short period of time, his accomplishments, in my mind, are very impressive. As most of you folks in this room know, a revision of the MSR has been in progress for many years. The October 2021 draft generated by the I got the wrong generated by the previous administration was recognized by many as an abusive protection of special business interest, and included the imposition of unjustifiable restrictions on the fees of airport users. It clearly did not meet the needs of the airport users and businesses. Director Amore's June 2022 draft, under consideration here, is a tremendous improvement toward establishing rules and regulations that serve the best interest of the city, the airport users, and the businesses. However, as should be expected, the current draft contains a number of residual provisions from the prior administration's draft, which are controversial and perhaps do not fully support the public's interest. These issues need to be addressed and to derive an appropriate MSR. Public comments are essential to arrive at an acceptable MSR. Although public comments were accepted by the prior administration, these comments are no longer appropriate since the revised draft is, thankfully, significantly different than its predecessor. I urge the Commission to solicit public input, to conduct detailed dialogue for the purpose for the proposed regulations and to revise the draft accordingly. This work would probably be most appropriate for the General Aviation Subcommittee. I've carefully studied the
Vince?
can I have another 30 seconds, please?
Give you 20, how about that?
I've carefully reviewed the current draft, and I have some very specific comments on it, and they're very much aligned with what the commissioner said here. In fact, his comments were so much on the mark that there might be some consideration to including him somehow in the subcommittee. Finally, I'd like to offer some optimism. I think that a fair and equitable MSR can be generated. I'm very confident after that of seeing what the director has done at this point. And I recognize, of course, that there's no way to satisfy everybody. There will always be some complaints residually. But I think it's possible to make an MSR that is solid enough so that the airport administration and the city can be protected from further problems. And I'm quite optimistic that this can be done.
Thank you, Vince.
And thank you for your time.
Aaron Green. And be careful, don't walk through the thing there and trip, go around the side. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me a moment to speak about this. I'd like to reiterate what's probably already been said. Of course, I think a lot of us come here with the same idea, and you're going to have to hear the same thing over and over. I also had concerns about obviously the previous MSRs that were drawn up were totally unacceptable. And I'm glad to see that it appears we're getting really, really close. There is still work to be done, and it certainly appears now that we're going to avoid litigation, which sure seemed like it was on the horizon before. And things seem to be heading in a fair and equitable manner for sure. And I'm glad to see that we're also addressing, or hopefully we'll address things like advertising for independent flight instructors. It seemed very odd that someone cannot pays a fee and a tax and a permit, and they can't advertise their business. Kind of hard to get business when you can't let anyone know that you have one. It actually makes my head hurt to think about how that really works. But hopefully that can get worked out. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And I look forward to seeing this go forward.
Thank you. Justin. Justin Roberts? Is it Robertson or Roberts? Robertson. Okay, Justin, with atrocious writing, you're up. Are you a pharmacist by any chance?
No,
Okay.
no.
Just curious.
Contractor. Greetings all. Thank you, Director. I just wanted to comment on one thing I saw in your introduction about the flying clubs. It said that based on the previous audit, there was a lot of instruction going on. I have knowledge talking to the guy who analyzed all the data that he was wrong in his interpretation. He came and told me how he came to that conclusion, and he had looked at the data. He didn't really know how to look at it, so he looked up on a website who had private pilot certificates, and he was wrong, and so he listed a lot of the data. So I just want to mention that off the bat, that was an incorrect assessment. I have kind of a radical idea for the minimum standards, which is just to strip out everything you possibly could. And my example would be flight schools. You know, they don't have to be open from 8 to 5 or be fully staffed or anything like that. Let the free market dictate their success. So I know that's a little bit radical, but anything that makes your job less, I would highly suggest you go for. So requiring logs to be submitted that you need to analyze why are you putting that burden on yourself? That's just crazy to me. I don't think it's necessary, so thank you.
Thank you. Wayne, is it Wayne Norris? Is that your last name, sir? Norris. Norris? Yeah. Wayne, go ahead.
Just to keep it short, congratulations. I wish you were here when I had my Cessna dealership here at 1407 Norman Firestone Road in 1978 to 1980, and the flying club that I created the year before, because this is so much of an improvement. It's crazy. It's wonderful. Thank you for that. And having sat through a lot of these meetings in DC, you guys are really pros tonight. Awesome.
Ole Akpish. Ole Akpish, new grandfather, I might add.
Thanks. I suck at public speaking, and I'll go quick. And wonderful words, I hear everybody, and everybody's high-fiving each other. But, you know, what is a stakeholder? What is equality? Because I'll tell you, how many here own their own business with more than one employee or two employees? How many on an airport? Down to 3. Until you've owned a business on an airport where you're locked into an airport, you have the FAA as your friend, you've got the TSA as your friend, you can't appreciate what a stakeholder and what equity is. Because, and don't take this the wrong way for an independent contractor, and I'm sarcastic, showing up in an airport with a headset, a certificate, or a guy with a pickup truck going, I'll fix your airplane, when you're paying 20 grand a month for rent plus liability insurance, plus everything else, calibrated instruments. Tell me what a fair stakeholder is, tell me what equality is, because it's got to be addressed. So when everybody's going, it's all wonderful and everything's equal, try being in our shoes. It's not. That's it.
Thanks, Ole. Daryl Eaton.
And I have pictures of the grandsons.
He's a cutie.
Airport Administration, Commissioners, Interim Director Brian DeMore, thank you very much. So yeah, first I want to say thank you for the new draft. It does seem very refreshing and heading in the right direction. And I want to thank you for listening to the public and taking all the comments. I wanted to read a few of the comments now that they've been made available to the public, specifically from AOPA. And I think it expresses the theme that we're working with here. The first one is, every airport in the United States with a flying club is subject to the same FAA guidance, yet SBA is the only airport known to AOPA to charge such a permitting fee. It is our belief that the fee places an undue burden on the flying clubs, is unreasonable, and must be removed. Another sentence, AOPA engages with hundreds of public use airports which allow independent operators across the nation, and we have not seen this level of prescriptive administrative control included in other minimum standard requirements documents. And I myself, at the beginning of this, called a bunch of airports all over California, Grand Flying Club up in Redding, talked to them. There's another flight school in the field, there is a flight school in the field. They have no club restrictions. River City Flying Club in Sacramento, there's 3 flight schools in the field. There's no club restrictions or fees. Aerospacer's Flying Club in Santa Monica, there's 4 flight schools in the field. There's no club restrictions or fees. So I'll read one final statement from the AOPA in their comments. It's a general comment, and this is one that I definitely agree with. I hope that instead of the burden of administration and fees and things that we're thinking about placing on the stakeholders in this airport, I'll read this quote. It is our sincere hope that the new airport director inspires a positive culture that allows the growth of the commercial and general aviation businesses at SBA to meet their full potential. And that is our hope, is that we can all create a community here. And as part of that, I was in the task force last summer, and I'd be happy to meet with the General Aviation Subcommittee to give any background and any information about the Flying Club. Thank you.
And unplanned, but last but not least, former commission member and commission chair Carl Hopkins. Just before Carl speaks, when we convene an airport subcommittee or a GA subcommittee meeting, the public is welcome at those meetings. They are published the same way these are. Comments can be made through the same format. So those are open, published meetings, and you have the opportunity to do the same thing we're doing here today. Go ahead, Carl.
Good evening. I will echo what everybody else has said, and that is that this minimum standard is significantly better than previous ones, and I think we're certainly on the right track. There are a number of issues I'd specifically like to point out here and would love to come to a GA subcommittee meeting to do the same. The first is that independent operators are required to have an unspecified amount of insurance and an unspecified fees. Both of those are critical. Specified one way, it makes independent operators impossible. Specified the other ways, it allows them. So although it may not be appropriate to put those numbers in the minimum standards, I think before the minimum standards are approved, those fees should be attached. I would suggest that there be one item for the commission to vote on that includes both the fees and the minimum standards. I would also recommend that those fees, like all of the other fees at the airport, be approved on an annual basis by the Airport Commission. The Section 8 prohibits independent flight instructors from leasing a fixed place of business from the airport. Why? There's no reason for this. Several independent flight instructors in the past have asked to lease space from the airport. There is space available. They'd like to lease it. Why are we denying that? You prohibit independent flight instructors from conducting ground school, but do not define what ground school is. For instance, typically an instructor will meet with a student maybe 30 minutes before a flight to review what they're going to learn, and 30 minutes after a flight to review what they did and did not learn. Is that ground school? You need a clear definition, because it's obvious from the past that these little nitpicky items are very important. If independent flight instructors or independent operators in general are required to provide logs, then flight schools and non-independent operators should also be required the same. There's no reason to treat them differently. Independent aircraft washers are limited to designated areas. Please define what that is. Specifically, and can an independent operator do a waterless wash of my airplane in my hangar? They've been doing this for years, and out on the ramp, I might add. The only restrictions are if they basically use water, they have to go out and use the wash rack, which is perfectly fine. It also says an independent washer cannot lease space from the airport. Independent washers have equipment and supplies. They are currently leasing either from the airport or from the FBOs. Why would we prohibit them from doing that? Why would we force them to lease space off of the airport so that they can then have to bring that equipment onto the airport to conduct their business? Is that my time already? Well, the last thing I would like, if I can, is that independent operators or independent maintenance operators need to be able to do more than just those things listed in 14 CFR Part 33, Appendix A. Restricting them to that is extremely, way too restrictive, I believe. We've already discussed the fees. The last item I guess I will put forth is, I know there are written comments that have been submitted. The question is, how do those written comments get to the commissioners and to the public? So I would hope that when someone does submit written comments, at some point they will be made part of the public record. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Anybody miss putting their speaker slip in that wants to speak now or hold their peace till the GA subcommittee meeting? Okay, so do I have any commissioners that have follow-up questions? So it seems, Director Moore, I don't think we need a motion for this, but it seems like we do need a motion. And the boss tells me we need a motion. So I'd like I'd like to see if anybody would love to make a motion to convene a GA subcommittee meeting to discuss some of the details of the new draft of the minimum standards.
As
I'm
the-
betting you would like to do that.
Oh, yeah. As the chairperson of the GA subcommittee, I'd like to request, as Craig has so eloquently described, our GA subcommittee meeting to occur.
I second that motion.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed. Okay, motion carries, and we'll leave it to you, Director Demore, to schedule that at, with everybody's staff availability and et cetera.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Well, I think, I have the agenda here somewhere. I believe that is the last item. So thanks, everybody, for attending. Thank you very much for attending. And congratulations to Oli, who left, who is a brand-new grandfather. And with that, I will adjourn this edition of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission.